One of the most popular topics for us, probably because of the world we live in with chairs, is to keep our low back free of pain. I'm trying to get as much view as possible. Here we go. And what that means and how we could think about certain topics and movements that can help us on that journey. And we'll start, as we always do, with a little check-in. Just being in a comfortable standing place. It doesn't have to be perfectly still. With a body scan, maybe breathing into different parts of your body, sensing your weight shift, or just moving from the top of your head down to your toes. Notice where you start. What comes to your awareness first? We all have places that our mind goes more than others. Good morning, good morning. And we'll start with a little gentle bounce. So shaking, oscillation. I swear the more I do it and the more I learn, the further I go, the more I love it, appreciate it. And we have all kinds of speeds and intensities and rhythms. I want you to feel really kind of gentle, especially since we're talking about the low back. Some of us are here with, some sensitivity, so we don't want to, bother anything. But I'm feeling the bounce come all the way from the ground. I'm changing my position so it moves in different places. And I'm really thinking of the letting go. If you can hear in my voice, I was sick a couple days ago. I'm feeling much better, but for me right now, I still don't want to push it. So it depends what you're feeling. Noticing your breath. We're going to give a little extra love for the lower body. So I'm going to focus on one leg. You don't have to, but suggestion could be to balance and shake out the foot and jiggle the tissues. We're not doing any controlled muscle movements. And then the other foot, other leg. You should be able to see my feet too. You keep bouncing. You could hold on, you don't have to. I'm not sure why my wide angle is not quite as wide, so I'm going to try to fit into my frame as best I can. Let's definitely have some tail wagging. So suggestion would be soft knees. Use your elbows and wag your tail. It's like get all that glute flesh jiggling around. And then a few more moments of any place that needs a little extra. I've got something going on upstairs here today. Okay. We're going to give a little bit of a tapping too. So we're going to focus around the waist and hips. You can tap again, different intensities and speeds, and also different parts of your hands. So you can do fists, knuckles, palm, up to you. And we're waking up a different type of proprioceptor. So we want to really tune into what's happening in this area today. So everything around the ribs, so waist, side waist, low back, belly, front of the pelvis, sides of the hips, and then down the legs. And so, wow, we're going into forward fold first. So let's bend kind of a lot. And take one foot in front. When in doubt, stick it out. Bend kind of a lot. One more time with the other foot in front. Anything else that wants a little love? Last few moments. You could stay down there too. And take a moment to feel what that's done already. And I'm going to tell you some key points to keep in mind while we wake up our feet. So I just have the floor because I don't know what you have, but any kinds of textures, little balls, tennis balls, towels rolled up, any stones if you have them lying around, or outside on the grass. Anything that gets all these bones moving is what we're after. So what I'd like us to play with is shifting weight, feeling our ankle, coming up onto the ball of the foot, rolling around the foot, so I'm not putting as much weight on it, gripping like you're trying to grab something on the floor, circling the ankle with the toes on the floor. I'm going through this fast so we can kind of play, and I'll tell you some other stuff. So 1 foot at a time. One of the things we want to start with to support how force is moving up our body, and especially in our lower back, is the arch of our foot. And to get the arch of our foot, we need the mobility of all of those little bones to be the opposite of stuck inside of a small shoe, only walking on concrete like a block at the end of our leg. Because they transmit how we're adapting to the ground, that information up through the leg, up through our hip, into the lumbar curve, which is one of the primary things we need to be upright. In an evolutionary sense, you're still on that same foot, starting to wake up all the different parts of your foot. We come from quadrupeds, or we come from crawling like a baby. And in that moment of evolution or development, our force is distributed in one curve over 4 points. And to go upright, we need 2 curves. So that lumbar curve is what keeps us upright. How's that 1 foot feeling? Okay. Feels a little more intelligent than the other one. So let's give some love to the other one. And you can go slower than I'm kind of showing as well. But I just want you to explore, like, where are all my toes? Where's the force going through? So the arch in our foot is directly related to the curve in our back. They're both going in to the body. And you'll find that people who have less lumbar curve often have fallen arches. And the arch is a really resilient, buoyant architecture. So the foot is our first place of meeting the ground. And we want that arch, it's almost like a 3-dimensional dome, to depress and rebound. And so we're just trying to get the elasticity of our foot there going on. While you're doing this, find a bushy tail kind of feeling. I feel like I'm the church lady. Do you guys know the church lady on SNL? Church lady dance? That's what's happening here. Ooh, moving that foot around. And the lumbar vertebrae are really big because we don't have a lot of other bony structures in that level of the body. And one of the other pieces that we have is, if we don't have that lumbar curve, the support moves from the center to the muscles that are more on the surface. And the big thoracolumbar fascial sheath that's more on the surface and acts like a structural element and tries to hold us up, which is not that efficient, ends up being really tiring and maybe painful. And the thoracolumbar fascia is so dense and thick, it actually has cells, myofibroblasts, that build connective tissue and muscle tissue. And because there's a few muscle fibers mixed in, they can contract based on the chemistry, our stress hormones, our pH, and it's not even about movement. And they don't relax very quickly until our nervous system relaxes. So we're gonna take a little walk. Again, it can be slow. It could be quicker. But what I want us to find is the front of the foot. When we land on the ball of the foot, we get a little bit more tone in the muscles of the arch of the foot and the calf. So just a little kind of bounce. I want you to feel for yourself this bounciness, this buoyancy. Different than our shaking, but focusing on the foot. If your feet get tired, you don't have to be so high up on the ball of your foot. but see if you can lean a little bit into it. Let your jaw go. Notice what's happening in your back. Let's take one hand to the low back, one hand to the belly. Kind of go with the back of my hand. And let's allow for a little more folding. So I'm going to step and let myself fold at the knees and at the hip. And I'm going to watch what happens in my lower back. So that's a lot of things to attend to. You don't have to get all of them all the time. You might be able to feel the curve get curvier and less. So when I fold, I get more curve. When I stick it out, I get a little more curve. It's small. See if you can notice that. This lumbar curve is key to being out of pain. Let's experiment. Find a place to lean, like one hand. I'm still tracking my back, you don't have to. And I'm gonna fold in my knees and push against the thing I'm leaning, stick my butt out a little bit. And then come on up. And then bounce around and find another one. Suggestion would be one foot in front of the other. Symmetry is overrated. Asymmetry is going to feel better. Maybe put your hands on your hips on the side. See if you can feel any change in your pelvis. And then find something to lean. As I fold in my knees and my hips, I'm going to push through my hand, push back through my tail, feel what happens in my hips so that one that's still there is tracking. See if you could feel this tilt. I'm going to kind of exaggerate so you can kind of see tilt. Oh. Let that go. And let's just tune into the feet for a moment. So let's step. You could step around. I'm going to step in place to show with the feet parallel. And then go a little wider parallel. And can you start to feel that they get less bouncy? And more weight comes into the inside edge. This is where we fall in our arches. Even if we're parallel underneath us, we tend to fall into the arches, which is going to flatten upstream. So the suggestion is to turn out a little, not ballet, just a little, and take a couple steps where you're a little bit more to the outer edges of your feet and see if you can feel the arch naturally there. So this is one of the keys too, is to avoid parallel, to turn out a little bit, and to keep those arches while we have folding happening so that we maintain the lumbar curve. So let's play with that in some movement. Let's take this feet wide, but turned out. You can always like test it out. Okay, what does it feel like turned in, turned out? Doesn't mean we can't ever do that, right? And then we're gonna squat down and we're not gonna stay vertical. We're gonna let ourselves fold like an accordion. And then bring your elbows to your knees or your hands to your knees. And just have a little shift side to side. Notice we have a lower back curve. If you don't, give yourself more space to elongate. So maybe coming up onto the hands, leaning back through the heels and the sit bones. Last week, we talked about the hips, putting some load through them. All of that's helpful too. So anything that was moving around in this realm would be super helpful. But let's pretend we're going to go pick something up from the ground. We could step one foot forward. Asymmetry is going to be helpful. Think of pushing your knees out a little bit to get on the outer edges of your feet. Find your lower back arch. Pretend you're going to pick something up. And think of just your legs, all that we tapped down below the legs, and come on up. Now let's pivot to the other side. Feel the pushing out of the knees a little bit. When in doubt, stick it out. It's real. Only go so far that feels good for you. Imagine you're picking something up, and then use your legs. Try it again, one more time each side. I'm going to show what not to do. Rounding. We don't want to put load through the rounded spine. And we've probably heard this kind of stuff, like lifting boxes from your legs, but I would just add the asymmetrical piece as a big one. Let's make a little vinyasa out of this. Step 1 foot forward. We're not going to pick something up, but we're going to squat down, turning slightly towards the front leg, keeping our bushy tail back, our weight in both feet, and then stand on the front leg, and let's bring the back leg forward, maybe off the floor, and turn towards it a little bit. 2 more times. Step back a little bit. Squat down, weight is in the middle, bushy tail, give a little turn towards the front leg, and push down to switch. One more. Relax your jaw. Again, you don't have to take your foot all the way off the floor. And other side. So we want to have the strength come from underneath. We don't want the muscles around the lower back to do all the work. We want it to come from the legs, especially the back of the legs and the glutes. And that actually feeds into the base of the pelvis, which feeds into the more central axis of muscle support. Come on back. Let's just give a couple hip circles, knees bent. Maybe softer in the front, both directions, just because we could round the back a lot. Looking at my notes because I don't want to forget anything. Okay. Forward folds, our favorite. Getting a little more range of my camera here. So this may not be something we do in life, but in practice. We usually will hinge at the hips. And in yoga teacher trainings, we always teach that we want to get the lumbar curve and that we have to keep our legs straight. Number 1, bending your knees will help you get that curve more. Number 2, turning your toes out. Number 3, asymmetry. So let's play with all 3 of these, but let's start, up to you, but just to start to compare, bring our feet parallel and hands on the hips. Keep your legs straight and lean forward, hinging only at your hips. Track your lumbar curve and see how far you can go. Some of us might go quite far. Feel what's working, how it's working, what it feels like, and then come back up. Personally, I can do that. It doesn't actually feel that good. Let's bend the knees. So I start with my knees bent, and I actually think of keeping my imprint really even as a way to engage my legs. You could bend a lot. Notice if you can keep that lumbar curve longer, a little easier. Come on up. Let's do the tiny turnouts. So I think of the heels close, maybe even touching, and the toes open like maybe 20, 30 degrees on each direction. Same thing. And see what you feel. Also noticing what you feel in your legs. Which one feels sweeter, like you want to do it more? Those 3 things can vary for each person. Here is the last, I guess this is the third, asymmetry. Let's start from hips width and pivot to one side. So now we took that 20, 30 degrees and pivot the whole body. And then bend your knees, hinging at the hips, feeling this fold in the knees and the hips. So we have the lumbar curve and it's supported with our strength. And then we can come up, looking up. Think of just your hamstrings and your feet pushing the floor. Let's try it again before we change sides. Hinging. Now the degree is up to you. But fun fact, when we bend, we actually engage more of the intrinsic muscles around our joints, which sounds good, but also gives more proprioceptive feedback for our nervous system. Let's do 3. And that more nervous system feedback is actually protective from injury because you'll have a greater sense of where you are and more embodied awareness. Other side. Pivot. And the legs are working, right? In a world of chairs, anything that gets our legs to work is good medicine for the rest of the day, the rest of life. I tend to find my breath emptying on the way down and filling on the way up. You don't have to. And you don't have to go this low either. One more. Come up, just take a few steps, kind of let that integrate, see if you notice anything. I just want to share a simple little mini flow that I love in this realm. Starting in that hips width parallel, we'll pivot. And then push into the feet. Feel that lift your heart, your eyes. And exhale, coming down like we just did. And then down where you still feel support in your legs, wag your tail and pivot to the other way. And then inhale, come on up. You could let your arms hang, you could let them reach, you could bring them to your hips, coming down on the second side. I really think of my heels and my tail wagging, and then press through the hamstrings and the feet. One more each side. You can improv with it a little bit if you want. Wagging. And inhale, coming up. And wagging. And coming up. Shake it off a little bit. And we were bouncing. And we feel this kind of accordion hinge in the knee, hip, and really the ankle too, right? Our whole torso has a little tip forward. We call this anteversion. And it feels a little funny to exaggerate. It is not rounding. It is like a bushy tail. And just a tiny inclination like that can be helpful for some to turn on the back of the body engagement. Let's step one foot in front. We're going to try to strengthen the back line with a stretch, but it's this balance between the two. And we're going to go slow. So the slowliness is the strengthener. So when I start to fold, I'm going to let my hips go back and bend my knees. Kind of like we just did. We have a little bigger distance, but we're going to go slow. So slow. And you bend more if you need to. You feel this in your leg. It's all good. And then come up so slow. So slow. Other way. Change. So it's bigger than my starting place we did before. Bigger step. As I fold, my hips go back. I bend my knees. That's that folding. And I go very slow. Strengthening the hamstrings. And anything that strengthens the hamstrings and the glutes is going to help the lower back. And that bend and fold is going to help us get the curve slowly come on up. Let's go back to the first side. And we're going to add, if you want, options. We're going to add, once we're down there, shifting our weight forward and then rewind. So we could think of this as a version of Parshvottanasana, if you know that one. No squaring hips. That's not going to be helpful for our lower back. So we're going to go slow. Pelvis goes back. We fold everywhere. We go so slow, so slow. And then maybe even without your hands, but totally optional, shift your weight forward until the back leg gets a little lighter. Shift your weight back and come on up using both legs. It's kind of amazing how strengthening that is, for me, at least. Try the other leg. So we bend, shift the pelvis. You maybe track, maybe take your hand to your lower back. We have the curve, and it's okay for those muscles to be working while we have the curve, as long as it doesn't feel painful. It might feel a little fatiguing. That's like kind of a good sign. Once you're there, you could shift it a little bit. And then return. And then just for fun, let's show one more. And if you came late, I don't have to leave at 45 minutes, so just FYI. We might go a little bit more. This is not if you are feeling delicate, but if you want to challenge yourself. Same thing, but we're going to balance and take the back leg up. So hips go back, maybe track your lower back, folding as much as you need to. You could fold a lot in your knee. Slow, slow, slow. Maybe we just stay here, or if you shift, back leg can float. And we're just going to hover. Nothing's squared, nothing's facing the floor. And with control, we very slowly return. Now I'm sweating. Other side. It can be so simple. Hips shift back, we fold. And I just want to really point out that the principles could be applied so many places. If you want, you can shift and balance. So the principles here are folding, the shifting back of the hips, the asymmetry, rewind, going slow for strength, the strength of the legs, hamstrings and glutes, the low back curve. It's not the exact exercise. Shake it off a little bit, maybe even give your hips a round of applause, your hamstrings a round of applause. Okay, we're going to make our way to the floor where there are so many ways to get there. And this can be challenging too. So if you are in real life, you could also use other pieces of furniture, chair, table to get to where you're going. But we want to think of a spiral staircase, folding, 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 keeping the low back curve. So whatever that looks like for you right now, I'm folding, thinking of a spiral staircase, keeping myself turning, thinking about where my supports are, which could be also my arms, and then find your way to the floor. Seated with your feet on the floor in front of you, like we are just hanging out at the beach. So another interesting thing to consider is, can we tilt our pelvis everywhere? We don't necessarily want to get to a place that we can't move the pelvis. That's going to limit our resiliency to find the lumbar curve. So I want you to find a place where you could rock. Closer is going to be harder. Further, wider is going to be easier. Lean back is going to be easier. And sure, the sit bones are maybe not that comfortable on the floor. We're just giving it a test. Feet at least hips width, maybe wider. Rock your knees and let your pelvis go with you. A couple times both ways. Notice what you feel. We're feeling how the legs dial into the hips and how that moves up through the lower back. And some of us might feel like at that end, there's a stretch and maybe it's not the most interesting stretch. So we're going to let it take us up where we can rock our pelvis. And then drop your tail to come back down. Just think of your knees pulling you along. And then we're leaning off to the side and give a little bit of rocking. And come on back. We have that element of strength we worked on, but we also need this element of option, like not getting stuck in one place. And come on back. I want you to really tune in that you're getting the curve from underneath. We're not trying to squeeze the back muscles to get the curve. We're using the orientation of the whole pelvic bowl. One more time. And then come on up and shake your legs out in front of you just to kind of plant some seeds for your further practice. Try straight legs in front of you and sitting up. Some of us, it's not going to be a problem at all. In a lot of trainings, we're taught to lift the pelvis, also awesome. Check and see your lumbar curve. So this for me is not a stretch, it's not hard, but I don't have that much curve. And just bend your knees and see how much more you get. So same things we can adjust here is we could bend, we can turn out, see if you can feel the difference between that. Even bent, bring your legs together, or turned out, oh, more curve. How much can you tilt your pelvis? And then strength. Pull your heels in, feel your hamstrings on the floor. Or sorry, feel your heels on the floor and your hamstrings really working, and that will engage even more. Let's test that out asymmetrically. One foot in. We can face in between the legs. How much can we tilt already more? But we still have those options. So asymmetry makes it more available. Bending makes it even more available. Turning out makes it even more available. Engaging makes it even more supported. No hands. Let's try the other side. How much tilt do you have? How much rocking? I noticed that like I'm fine, I have that rocking, but there's definitely more rocking back, right? So then I bend. Now I have more rocking forward into the curve. I turn out and I engage and I have no problem sitting up nice and tall. So asymmetry, bending, turning out in no particular order. Let's try one more, everybody's favorite. We don't want to go to our max necessarily. Check and see how much rocking you have. So I like to not be at my max so that I can rock. At my max, it doesn't happen. Some of us are like, I don't know, there's no curve. If there's no curve, I'm going to show that, but let's do the same play. So we're already kind of turned out. Some people would be. It takes work to keep your toes straight, so we can let them turn out. Bend the knees, pull your heels in. Feel free to use your support or maybe even hold underneath your thighs and find that nice lumbar curve. It may not feel as like clean lines, but your body is going to feel so much better later on. Okay, let's lie down. So many ways to lie down. We might, if our back is really hurting, going straight back around it is not going to be so great. So we could arch to the side. I'm keeping my low back curve. Think of coming into a fetal position and then rolling to the floor. And oftentimes that's something folks figure out just by necessity. So I just want to mention twists. spinal twists. A lot of times we cross one leg over, or we bring both legs together and over. There's others that are more extreme. One of the most vulnerable places, if not the most, is to rotate your flexed or rounded lower back. So a lot of times, if we bring one knee in, because we're bringing it in with our hands, we're tipping the pelvis and losing the lumbar curve. And then if we twist inside of that, it's not so great. Now, it's not going to hurt probably because we're not putting weight through it, but it's not helping. So I wanted to give some options for this kind of thing that maintains more of the curve. And what happens when we maintain the curve is the force flows through the spine and we actually get more twist in the upper body. So if we were to extend one leg, bring the other leg in, let's not use our hands. Let's just use the strength and ability around that part of the body. And then as we tip over, see what lands on the floor. It's probably going to be more your foot than your knee. Sure, gravity's helping, but usually it's the hand pushing the knee. And usually if a hand pushes the knee, we feel the stretch just really in the hip. So I'm going to actually put my foot on the floor and with my hand, hold my shin and push my shin into my hand. Feel like I'm having a bit more of an arching in my back. And when I tune in, I feel the stretch all along my side and a twist more up in my thoracic part, my rib cage. Well, not the ribs, but that part of the spine. So notice that for yourself. Feel free to play with the contrast. And then come on back, release that leg to the floor. Let's try the other side. So again, no hands is just more truthful of your capacity. And then cross over and see where it sort of lands naturally. And if I were to pull on my knee, I kind of feel where that happens. So this side's different for me. I feel that right in front of my shoulder and my hip, but it doesn't go through. So my shoulder's feeling gravity more than what's happening in my leg. So I'm gonna put that foot on the floor, hold my shin, and push into my shin and reach with my arm. And now they kind of connected, but they also, we never want to have stretches only at the joints, especially if they're loud. So those were at the joints and they have softened, they've gotten quieter. And come on back. Let's go to the first side again. One other variation we could use, let's cross, put the foot on the floor, is to also bend the bottom knee. So if I bend my bottom knee, conveniently I kind of catch my foot. And I don't need to have my hand on my shin. I can kind of push my ankle into my knee. And I have a nice lumbar curve. No strain in the back. Now, you might be different. Everyone's different. And I can just slide my foot around my knee to come back out. Extend both legs. Bend that second knee in without any hands. Cross over. And when I cross, I'm going to bend my bottom knee and catch that foot. And then I can just stretch like a hug, press a little bit of my ankle against my knee, and just check that you have a lumbar curve. And then easy way out is sliding to come on out. Bring both feet to the floor. Resting like this can be a lot nicer than with straight legs. In Shavasana, supporting the knees could be nicer to maintain the lumbar curve. And we can also really enjoy twist from here. So feet wide and they stay wide. And we rock our knees and it pulls through our pelvis and allows an arch in the spine. So let's just enjoy this back and forth. Feel your tail get heavy to bring you up. And I notice when I teach this, often people just put their feet together. I don't know why. I say, leave your feet apart. And they just put them right together. So just notice if there's a piece of us that thinks like we're getting more, if we like bring it together, we're getting more ringing out. We're actually getting more distribution and more space, keeping them apart and more rotation in the hip. One other piece we could add to this is the leg that's kind of in the back. Push a little bit and let that arch all the way up to your heart. Feel the strength of your hamstring and glute, not nearly like we did standing, but a little bit there. And then release it and let your pelvis find the floor again. Knees fall, and then the foot that's in the back, give a little push. Feel that back body. You have the nice lumbar curve. You can feel that arch up through your heart if your mat's not too sticky. And then let it fall back into your tail. One more each side. Our ability to push and release, to put load through and come in and out easily without feeling stuck are really important criteria for the whole body. And shake out your hands and feet to the sky. Really feel your feet. We're going to end with a little foot massage. So one foot on the floor, one foot across your knee. A little drink of tea. Lasted this long. I'm going to sit up. You guys lay down. Same. Same foot massage. First, just let your hands meet your foot with a few squeezes as I get a cough drop. Cough drops are kind of magic. Bet. So a few squeezes first. And then let's wring out with both hands, starting from the front of your foot. Think about getting all those little bones to move around. And then come up a little higher. So we have one hand on the back of the arch, one hand on the ankle. And then both around the ankle. Then bring your opposite hand to interlace with your toes as best you can. And move that around. You could think of a rotation, waviness, circles, unsticking, ungluing. And then see if you can just get curious of the like rivers of each toe. I think of the bone lines as rivers of support. So just see if you can feel, mostly from the top, but curious from the bottom, where those rivers are and kind of flesh them out. And then finally on the heel, squeegee off of your Achilles. And give that foot a round of applause. Switching sides. First, just saying hello, squeezing, feeling all of the shapes and densities, knowing there's a kinesthetic language and message. And you might be able to tune in to pieces that are more sticky. And then ring out from the forefoot. Think about just wiggling the keys and the locks. And come up to the back of the arch and the front of the ankle. And then around the ankle. And then interlacing your fingers with your toes. And seeing what you can move around. And then looking for the rivers. And listening with your hands. And then squeegee off of your Achilles. And giving a round of applause. Let's take just a little rest on the earth. Notice there's two more points I want to share. But since we're here, you could let your legs go extra wide or keep the feet on the floor at a distance that's easy to maintain the lumbar curve without effort. And let your breath go low into your belly. Notice that you have space behind your lower back. Your pelvis is heavy like a big puddle. And you could sense the curves all along the spine. You can sense the space behind your neck. If your feet are on the floor, you can sense the arches. And if your legs are straight, you could sense the space behind your knees. And imagine that your breath could flow all along those curves. All along this central support flow. And if you'd like, you can always stay longer in your own space. Or slowly make your way back. And again, changing levels. I like to think of spiral staircases rather than coming up straight like a sit-up. And even when we sit, probably fewer of us in general sit on the floor. Maybe in this community, it's higher than average. Asymmetry is super helpful. Think of your ability to rock your pelvis. If you sit not on the floor, asymmetry is super helpful. Think of the ability to rock your pelvis, change it up. And I wanted to just address two other things that weren't really in the plans, but put them on the recording. This is just for us. And I made it through my coughing fit. Is the special request for plank. And, down dog is right next door to it. So probably what's happening in plank that's hurting low back is a little bit of a falling of the pelvis, compressing and just flattening the low back. So I would say that plank could be more like a tabletop, or maybe a little shorter so that we could have that hinge. We should still be able to tilt our pelvis anywhere we are, or maybe even turning the heels in so we have a little bit more turning out. I personally like a sway side to side plank. I'll show from this angle so you can see that the pieces that we were talking about are there, the asymmetry, the ability to find my lumbar curve. Not every context will allow for that. And also, if I really push into the floor with my hands and my toes, it tones more in the front than in the back. So that could be helpful too. And then downward dog, which is a forward fold. And it's just sharing weight with the arms. So all the things we did with the forward fold would apply. I could bend my knees. I could turn out. And I could find the asymmetry by doing a little bit of a wagging dog. So the principles are the same. Asymmetry, folding, turning out, and then remembering your feet. Remembering your feet are the antenna, the buoyancy and pliability, mobility of your feet, and the pelvic tilt are talking to each other. So get curious how that is flowing for you and get back to me and let me know how it feels. Let's take one breath to seal it up. Thanks for sticking with me through coughing. We're so grateful for each breath. Bow to your own wisdom within you. Thank you all. Your backs be free.